Let's talk about how this became this. For those of you who don't know yet, my name is Pam Walls. I'm a board game designer, and today I'm going to talk about the journey from idea to publication for my latest published game, Blob Party. In case you don't know, Blob Party is a cooperative party game where everyone starts as individuals and tries to become one big team by saying the same answers before the end of 7 rounds. A category card and a word card are turned over, and everyone writes down whatever comes to mind for those 2 prompts. Anyone who wrote the same thing becomes a team or a blob and will provide one answer for their team moving forward in the game. A new category and word card are turned over, and once again, any players or blobs who wrote the same thing become a team. If the group is able to merge together into one big blob before the end of 7 rounds, they win. So the earliest notes I could find about the beginnings of this game are from February 2020. I was in New York for the New York Toy Fair because my second published game, Act Fast, was being shown there for the first time, and I wanted to be there for that. I also took that opportunity to introduce myself to other publishers who were there. I was primarily pitching one of my games called Where the Wind Blows, which is a tile shifting game, but I also had a few other games I was showing publishers. One was a pirate-themed push your luck game called Loot and Limits, and another called Chuckin' Cherries, where I turned the game box into a sort of plinko board and you were trying to get your cherries in your basket at the bottom, like this. And at this time, I was also thinking of fun word games, but nothing really came together in time to show it then. But I have notes from February 2020 of the buds of what would eventually grow into Blob Party. So on February 18th, 2020, I wrote an idea for a new game in my phone in the Notes app that I called Link Line. It went through a few iterations over a few days, but essentially it was a cooperative party game where a group is shown a starting word, and then 3 more words are turned over. So let's say the starting word is dinosaur. And the 3 cards are history, famous, and building. Everyone secretly writes down which of the 3 words they think goes best with dinosaur. Everyone reveals, and if everyone chose the same word, the group can continue on. If not, they lose a life, and if they lose 3 lives before the end of 8 rounds, they lose. If the group all chose the same word, you would put a token on that card, and then you would have 4 options to choose from to link to the previously chosen word. The options will continue to increase as the rounds go on. The group is trying to all choose the same word before losing 3 lives before the end of 8 rounds. To be honest, I had forgotten about this early iteration of Blob Party until I was reviewing my notes yesterday, and I kind of still love this idea. I never playtested this version and I forgot about it for months. I continued coming up with new ideas and working on other games. I think I really might need to do an inventory of all of the ideas I've had in the past few years, since there might be some good stuff there. Currently, I only create a folder for a game in my Google Drive if I've playtested it or I see real potential in it. But I think I need to do a better job of keeping a record of every idea I have. In June of 2020, I was brainstorming new ideas and wrote, "New game ideas brainstorm. Connect with others by thinking the same way, same thought process." And this is when I thought of a game I called Thought Tree. And this was the first time I played around with the idea of starting with one word and then expanding out as much as possible and then trying to come back to one word, like an accordion. So for this game, you started with one word, like piano. Then everyone writes down a word that comes to mind for piano, maybe keys, music, ivory, or chords. And then you had to try and think of something that connects all of those words that isn't piano, which, as you can imagine, would be quite difficult. This game didn't go anywhere, but this idea of going from a large number of answers back down to a single answer was something I kept in the back of my mind. Jumping ahead now to December 4th, 2020, I came up with a new idea and wrote, "Party game idea. Have I had this idea before? Start with one clue. Try to get back to one clue." I was trying to think of something like this in New York last February. Look back at my notes. So this idea had been percolating in the back of my mind for months and then came back up to the surface in December 2020. I wrote, maybe the starting word is always a noun, and then everyone has to write an adjective, and then have to write a noun, so it goes back and forth between nouns and adjectives. Example, starting word, mountain. Adjectives written by players, big, high, snowy, cold. Nouns written by players, can't be mountain. Snowman. Yeah, I think I ran into this issue before. Like, people will just find different ways of describing the starting word. So I ran into the same issue I had with the thought tree idea I had had months earlier. A few days later, on December 9th, 2020, I played around with the idea of teams, where a word would be turned over and each member of one of the teams has to think of a word related to the starting word. The players would reveal, and any unique words would earn their team 1 point. Any duplicate answers would be stacked on top of each other. Then each team member on the other team has to write something that links some or all of the previously written words from the other team. If they all wrote the same thing, they would get maximum points. I quickly realized this wouldn't work very well for small teams. It would only work for very large groups since it is all about how many answers match, and if you only have a team of two, it wouldn't work quite well. So I shifted this back to a cooperative model. For the next couple of weeks, I kept kind of circling around the same idea from different angles, and this note from December 29th, 2020 kind of sums that up when I wrote, start with one adjective. Everyone writes a word down associated with that. If everyone wrote down the exact same word, they win. If not, then what happens? And this is how it is designing a board game. It's like trying to put a puzzle together without knowing what it's supposed to look like at the end. Keep in mind, this was all happening during the height of COVID, and I had just moved to Vancouver, so playtesting options were limited. But I was able to playtest the game over Zoom with my friends on New Year's Eve 2020. And through testing, things started clicking into place. During the playtest, I was still trying to make the accordion idea happen, where the group starts with one word, expands out with many related words, and then tries to get back to one word. I was stacking any duplicate answers on top of each other, but players were remaining individuals all the way to the end. It was during this playtest that I wrote, if you match with anyone, then you become a team, trying to become one big team. This was the turning point for the game. On January 6, 2021, I wrote, call it Blob Party. I remember thinking that this idea of becoming a team if you wrote the same answer and then trying to bring more people into your team felt a lot like Blob Tag, a game that I played when I was a kid where one player is it, but if they tag you, now you're it too. And the it blob continues to grow until everyone is eventually tagged. I was still hung up on the idea of trying to keep the answers linked together all the way to the end. So I had two words turned over. Everyone writes something that connects the two words. Anyone who wrote the same thing would become a blob or a team moving forward, and two answers from the previous round would now become the words that everyone is trying to connect. During a playtest on January 13th, 2021, my friend Amanda suggested turning over a new card each round. So I decided to try having a new card turned over each round along with one of the previous round's answers. I just couldn't get over wanting to have that visual link between all of the words on the table. This happens a lot with designers, where it is tough to let go of the core idea that started the whole thing off. But once I let that go, the game came together quite quickly. I realized through testing that the fun wasn't having words link all the way through, it was matching with other players and working with different people each game. So I tried having all new cards turned over each round, and finally the pieces were starting to fit. This game was getting very positive feedback from playtesters, and even though I had only been playtesting it for a short period of time, an opportunity came up to pitch it to a publisher, and so I decided to throw it out there to see what they thought. This publisher had a designer day in February 2021, and my pitch for Blob Party was pretty close to what it eventually would be. That publisher would eventually say no to Blob Party, but I pushed forward, continued to test it, and then I applied for a speed pitch event run by Unpub in partnership with Gamma. Unpub is a great group that hosts speed pitch events throughout the year, and I highly recommend checking them out. Gamma is short for the Game Manufacturers Association. They are a trade association, and they hold a trade show for their members each year. They also host Origins, a board game convention which is open to the public. I submitted 4 games to the speed pitch event, and Blob Party was the one that was selected. So on March 17th, 2021, I pitched Blob Party to 10 different publishers. This game had the most positive reception of any game I've ever pitched. 6 of the 10 publishers expressed interest in publishing it, and 2 said it's not the type of game they publish, but that it's a good game. This is the type of feedback you are really hoping for when you pitch a game. After the event, I followed up with the publishers who expressed interest. And at this event, there were 2 groups of publishers, so I only pitched to half of the publishers. So I sent the game to some of the publishers in the other group who I thought might be interested. One of them was interested and asked me to send more info. I sent them the print and play files, and they said they would play the game internally and get back to me. While I was going back and forth with a few publishers about possibly signing Blob Party, I continued to test it. Some changes I would make would be that answers did not have to be only one word, to further differentiate my game from games like Just One or Medium. And now groups turned over a category card and a word card. I also started playing around with the idea of having squishy little blobs in the game. I thought about having a blob for each category, and if you matched with someone on that category, you would each attach one of the little legs of the blob to your finger, and by the end, you could be attached to a bunch of different blobs. I tested it with other designers in my Board Game Besties Facebook group, and designer Sarah Shipp said, the experience changes depending on who you blob with. And I was like, yes, exactly! We discussed the blobs again, and the idea of each player having a blob came up, and squishing them together with those you match with, which in retrospect makes a lot more sense than connecting via category blobs. I went back and forth with a couple different publishers, but eventually went with WizKids and was so excited to sign another contract. The game was scheduled to be released in the fall of 2022, but it got pushed back to the summer of 2023. So this game came together and was picked up by a publisher quite quickly. But then it took over 2 years to come to market. I went to Gen Con a few weeks ago and got to see Blob Party set up at the WizKids booth, with people demoing it throughout the convention and participated in daily Blob Party games, which was very, very cool. And now I have another game coming out next year, which has also been pushed back several times, but I can't wait to be able to tell you more about that one. It is very different from anything else I have done so far. And as always, I continue to pitch to publishers to try and get more games signed. Well, I hope this design diary was interesting to you. I hope you enjoyed seeing a bit of the behind the scenes of how I brought an idea that had been rattling around in my head for a while, got it to the table, and eventually got it signed. And now it's in stores and in people's homes. Let me know if you have any questions about this process. If you enjoyed this video, or if it was helpful to you, I hope you like and subscribe. Follow me on social media at Pam Walls Game Design, and now go watch me unbox Blob Party, and I'll see you over there.